The bulk of my red oak comes from a fellow I found on Craigslist who had some rough sawn on site and sticked outside, so the majority of it is covered in grit and needs some serious cleaning before being milled. I'll clean up a couple dozen boards every now and then and cut them into clear sections. When I start a project, I just need to sort through the pile for boards which fit the requirements of the current project. Once the material is selected, it gets planed to the required thickness if there are not any bows or twists. In this case, everything needs to be the same arbitrary thickness. Something close to 3/4 of an inch works well for poster frames. The jointer cleans up an edge for referencing against the table saw fence when ripping the material to width. Some pieces require a few more passes than others. When the milling is complete, the material is sorted for color match and grain pattern. Secondary consideration is given for efficient use. Each of the boards is ripped to width with the joined edge or the freshly cut edge against the table saw fence. A quick layout is done to get a feel for the size of the project. Adjustments are made to use the best faces of the wood, either by obscuring knots or pushing them out where they will be cut off in the final dimensioning. A decision made later for this frame, all the pieces are kept at full length. Corners are squared and clamped, and the overlapping parts are marked with a pencil line. With painter's tape, top, right, left, and bottom are all identified with the tape on the front face. The target is half-lap joints which continue past the joint with a half diamond shape occluding the edges. The T-bevel is set at 20 degrees and lines are marked on the top portion of the joint. The first attempt was made using a handsaw, when the sudden realization hit that I'm terrible at this, and better yet, I have a bandsaw. So, after the first cut was made, I switched to the bandsaw for the rest. The machinist vise is used with some cutoffs as cawls to protect the pieces as they're cleaned up with a chisel and file. The material below the half diamond shape is hogged away with a dado stack on the table saw. Besides being quicker than just using a chisel, it gives a fairly smooth and consistent depth. With the material hogged away, the vertical top pieces are laid out on the horizontal back pieces, and the negative of the occlusion is marked out. Okay, so I'm not completely incompetent with a handsaw, but I am more comfortable and accurate with power tools. The blade is kept level during the cut to keep a consistent depth of cut across the piece. The chisel is used to clear the large triangular chunks out of the mating piece of the half-lap. Then, the chisel is used to smooth out the bottom and test that it complements the top piece of the joint properly. Originally, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the leftover ends of the frame. A bit of overhang was desired, but not really defined in my mind. What was decided was simply to leave the random lengths and just mark the ends here with 20-degree angles. And back to the bandsaw to cut the ends. I had my share of handsawing a couple of steps back. A file is used to clean up the rough bandsaw cuts again, and then switched over to some 120 grit sandpaper to aggressively smooth things out. And every woodworker's favorite part of the project, sanding. The edges were eased quite a bit since the joints and the half-laps did not come together quite as nicely as I would have liked. A bit of a shadow will help hide the imprecise joinery. And that finished up my daughter's Frozen poster frame. The second frame also uses a half-lap joint, but something a little different and with curves. The process is similar at the start, laying out the dimensions on the boards. One of the difficulties from the first frame was the lack of layout lines, so here the lines are wrapped completely around the pieces. A 2-inch Forstner bit was used to create a curve template. Since the poster for this frame is landscape, the short vertical pieces get the rounded occlusions. The ends are also marked with partial rounds for all of the pieces. The bulk of the curve is removed at the bandsaw and the excess on the ends, but well away from the actual lines. The project foreman showed up, so I set him up with some eyes and ears for the shop. The poor man's manual oscillating spindle sander is used to sand up to the lines on the curves.
What did you say?
Train poster.
You said you said poster.
As before, each piece is labeled with top, right, bottom, and left. The frame is laid out, squared up, and clamped. Each of the curves is marked for the mating horizontal pieces. To improve accuracy, or at least not exceed the width of the join piece like the first frame, the sacrificial fence is marked on each side of the cut and lined up to the layout lines so they won't go too wide again. Cleanup with a chisel and file was necessary since not enough material was hogged out by the dado stack, but the tighter fit in the joints made it worth the effort. The dado stack is adjusted to the proper height for the mate of the half-lap joint. Then, material is hogged out to save chiseling time, and it provides a nice reference surface for depth when doing the cleanup. The rest of the material from the half-lap bottom needs to be cleaned away with a chisel and file. The chisel is lined up a little proud of the reference line to start, and then between the chisel, file, and regular checking, a decent fit is achieved. The belt sander makes fairly quick work of the ends which extend beyond the joint. Each is sanded to the marked lines. This time the edges are eased around the joint to accentuate the difference in the boards rather than hide imperfection, so only a slight rounding is done. The drum from the drill press works in the contour nicely. I really like the way walnut accents red oak, and that they're also both local species in West Michigan. An offcut pre-drilled on the drill press and clamped into place makes a decent guide for dowel placement. Glue is applied to both sides of the joint with a brush, and the joint is assembled from both the top and bottom. A drop of glue is dabbed into the hole, the dowel is sanded, and then tapped into the hole with a hammer. So the blade doesn't get all gluey, the dowels are trimmed a bit above the surface. When all the joints are glued up, clamps are applied on each corner of the frame. A 120 grit sandpaper in a little time takes care of machining marks. Even the flush cut saw sometimes leaves a little bump which will sand down quickly. Any glue squeeze out is also cleaned up, like where there was some severe checking which shattered one of the ends that had to be re-glued. A piece of scrap across the frame and a clamp on both sides work for a hold down. Then a 1/4 inch rabbiting bit was used to create a rabbet for the plexiglass poster and backer. The rounded corners left by the rabbiting bit are then cleaned up with a hammer and chisel. Plexiglass cuts nicely on a table saw, though it spits out a million tiny little flecks of plastic, and those flecks stick to everything and anything because of static electricity. The table saw rib capacity is only 30 inches, approximately 5.5 inches less than I needed, but some angle iron, clamps, and square stock provide an auxiliary fence for the cut. A microfiber cloth is used to wipe away any obvious dust from the final sanding. Mineral spirits give a good indication of any missed machine marks and how the grain will look after the finish is applied. The frozen poster for the first frame is in cooler colors, so a couple coats of clear wipe on lacquer was used to keep the color of the frame on the cooler side. The poster for this frame is a bunch of steam locomotives on a white background. Shellac will create a warmer, deeper color which will go well with the poster. It also darkens the walnut dowel end grain. The protective cover is peeled off the plexiglass on both sides, and the plexiglass is slid into place. Next, the poster is laid on the frame with the backer placed over it. Painter's tape will hold it well enough for now, but the backer is a little small and will need to be replaced. Painter's tape is used to protect the finish. The center is found by measuring from one side and verified by measuring from the other. A very fine drill bit is used to pre-drill for the nails of the simple sawtooth frame holder, and the nails are gently tapped into place. And here is the completed frozen poster frame. Let's head to your room.
A train poster! It's a train poster! Frozen poster?
Your sister got a frozen poster. What did you get?
A train poster!
Which one's your favorite? Can you point to your favorite train?
This!
That one. Which one is that?
A Union Pacific.
Oh, all right.
I did my train!
Ethan, do you like your train poster?
Yes.
Can you smile for the camera? Ethan. All right, good enough.